Hello! So, today we're talking about the first page of your manga, which is arguably, one of the most important pages, as it's your chance to really hook your reader in, and then convince them that, they should keep reading. And so, today's video, we're going to discuss techniques to really make your first page good. And it's based on my analysis of 27 different first pages. So basically, any volume I have, any series I have the first volume of, any manga, specifically, I didn't use, comics and stuff because I wanted to focus on manga. Maybe I'll make a video about those if you guys want that. But yeah, all the manga I have, if I have the first volume, we're analyzing those to talk about, what they did for their first page and what works. I picked these specifically because I'm like, well, they must have done something right. They convinced me to buy it. Yes, I am aware that it isn't the biggest sample space and it tends to lean towards battle shonen and specifically stuff from Shonen Jump because that's just most of what I own, most of what I've read. But I still feel like that I learned some interesting things that I can share with you guys. And yes, I do confess that data-wise, I don't have as much data as, if you used even more than what I own. And maybe if you guys have some favorite pages that you want me to talk about or, consider. But I specifically wanted to go with stuff that I own because, that means I bought it. And also it meant that I have official translations rather than scanlations, which could potentially be inaccurate. So the first thing to note is I found two major approaches that the different stories all took for how they introduce it. So it's either the sizzling start method, so starting in media res, which is just a fancy term for in the middle of the story, or it was exposition. So yeah, basically the first sort of one we're going to talk about is the starting with the exposition, which I found common in a lot of fantasy series where they're really trying to sell you on the concept of the story. Specifically Naruto and Yu-Gi-Oh! Really lent into the sense of a grand mythology, and something like Gachiakuta, which I've got here, kind of basically gave a thesis statement as its first thing to get you thinking like a rhetorical question, got you really thinking about what the themes of the story is. And the other method in media res is basically an approach that reminds me of a method we learned in primary school writing, which is sizzling starts. I don't know if that's a standard term, but basically starting with something big, capture your attention, hook your reader by starting with something exciting. So this is easier for more grounded series, because you don't have to establish setting as much, so it's much easier to just jump straight in. For example, something like a neighborhood story does stuff like this, so it's it's a more slice of life, so it's very easy for this to just jump sort of straight in. But even some fantasy series do use this approach, but then they often later on would then do the exposition later. For example, My Hero Academia, they do this where they have the first page is sort of establishing it, and then they have basically, I think it's, if I remember correctly, hold up, let me check. If I remember correctly, its first page is the sizzling start, then it has the 2-page spread, which is still part of the story, and then it uses the next page, that page after that, to explain the world. Yeah. So it's page 4, goes back to do the exposition stuff rather than doing it on the very first page. So yeah, so something, and also I noticed that something where, the magical status quo hasn't been established yet is also one to use this method. So something like Sailor Moon isn't explaining what magical girls and what Sailor Moon is because she's not Sailor Moon yet. So, if it's something that's an origin story, not that Miraculous Ladybug isn't a manga, but if it was, it would probably also use this method. Because, she hasn't gotten to that point yet. And that's also why my story doesn't use the exposition method, because that's not what you need to know at the very start. And I also found that, what I would say is that I found that, which method is chosen is more dependent on your specific story, and think about what you think is really going to sell it. Is your cool world what's going to sell it? But also, be careful, because if your world is too complicated to explain on the first page, then maybe don't start there. For example, Assassination Classroom, its premise is quite weird, quite important to establish, but they don't do it on the very first page, because it takes more than a page to get you to understand what's going on. Whereas something like Naruto, which I've got, the second volume here, even though the first is up there somewhere, they can say, you need to just basically know that it's got, a demon thing inside Naruto, and that it's about ninjas. There's not a lot of, knowledge you need to know straight away, compared to something like Assassination Classroom, which is going to take longer than a couple of sentences to really explain, because you only have a limited amount of words on your first page. And I found that, like, a lot of first pages tend to have less information. They were lucky to have, if they had multiple panels, they were lucky to have more than 3. The only exception, really, that I found to this is Pokemon Adventures. Its first page is very densely packed. We can grab this out. It almost has, like, a sort of mini arc on its first page, but, like, see how, like, this page has a lot of panels? That is very atypical, I found, for like, your first page of a manga. Typically, it would have 3 at most, I would say, but often they had bigger panels with, you know, establishing shots and stuff. And also, the first page can help establish tone. I specifically found Berserk, which, no, I'm not going to show you guys the first page of Berserk. And if you are under 18, which I know some of you guys are, don't go looking it up. It is not for you, but it was very good at establishing the tone that, oh, this is a dark series, this is for adults, this is not for children. And yeah, so I feel like that's something that your first page can really do, is help establish what kind of a story it is. So this is a time where you're, like, really thinking about what your pitch, like, how would you sell this story? This is basically the embodiment of that, tends to be how to go with it. And, like, also to take into account, like, what your first chapter is going to be about as well. So, like, something like Hunter x Hunter also established the tone by, like, giving you this sense of, like, adventure, which, you know, is a big part of the series. And now I want to talk about some series that I think did things that were really weird and, like, particularly unique. They broke certain conventions. So, like, we mentioned the Pokemon. Another one, Rico Magica. Its first page doesn't have illustrations on it. It's just one big speech bubble, which, like, it's literally the only other manga I've seen do this. So, like, we're talking about this page here. It's just a big speech bubble. That is not common. Typically, you will have illustrations on the page. And yeah, like, we've got Pokemon, and also Link Click, which I'm not sure if I should have included this, because it's an adaptation. It's in, like, basically an ani manga, which, if you're unfamiliar, is basically, like, so Inuyasha has an ani manga, where it's like, there was the manga, then they made the anime, and then they remade the anime the anime screenshots into a manga. So, like, this is an adaptation of the donghua, which is the Chinese term for like, their Chinese equivalent of anime. So it's using, like, film techniques. It's not the same. So that would probably be more why it's weird. And I also thought that Mashal's first page was really cool to me, because it kind of was like a hybrid of the two methods. As it starts off with your typical sort of narration stuff, like, so it's got all your text bubbles explaining that, like, this is a world with magic, and then it like, leads directly into the first scene, whereas most of the time that first page, if it's narration in particular, it tends to just be narration. It's kind of like at the start of Hunter x Hunter, where it's like, this is a world where hunters go get treasure and stuff. That's basically the first page of Hunter x Hunter. Or something like Full Metal Alchemist, where it's like, equivalent exchange. Funnily enough, Full Metal Alchemist does not use the exposition method for its first page, because I do have it up here. You guys can't see it on camera. But yeah, it's one that I included, and funnily enough, Full Metal Alchemist did not use this method. So yeah, I feel like those are the two main approaches I found, and I found that it didn't really, because I also checked what year everything came out from, what magazine it was published in, because I will include a document that, like, has all my notes. I will include you guys so that you guys can have a look at that if you want details I wrote about every single page I analyzed, because I'm not going to talk about all of them in the video. But yeah, like, I thought maybe some methods were based on what year it came out. That didn't seem to really be a factor. Neither did, like, most of the series I have are shonen, so I don't know how much of it is influenced by, like, your specific demographic, but I found things like the demographic didn't seem to be too much of a factor, but I don't have any josei. I think I've only got 2 shoujo, and I'm not sure how many seinen I've got. I've got maybe 1, Vinland Saga was shonen at this point. I didn't actually know that until I did this, that it was actually initially published in a shonen magazine, because it's often considered one of the great seinens. It has since transitioned, but its first page was shonen. So yeah, I don't have a lot of examples outside of shonen, so I'm not sure how much demographic plays a factor, but I couldn't notice from the data I have it being a factor where it's like, oh, certain, you know, years really liked this method, certain this and that. It feels like it's very much catered to what does your story need. Do you need to be, does your first page need to say, in a world with XYZ, or, you know, like, long ago there was a big war that happened, or are you just jump straight in? Like, it's something to, the method you pick is more dependent on that, and I would say, to summarize your tips, the two methods are either, like, sort of an exposition type, or just going straight into your story. Exposition type is useful, especially for fantasy stories, but if your story has a setting that's too complicated, then don't do that. And often if you have a fantasy story and don't pick this method, if you pick the other method, you will likely later on in the chapter do it. So possibly you could write whilst you're scripting or storyboarding, or before you actually start making, you could possibly play around with which way works better. So maybe like you could write a script version that has it at the very start with the exposition, you could have it try later, so you can play around, especially in those pre-production stages before you start drawing, or even if you've got the pages, you could rearrange them, I guess, but that's probably less comfortable to do. So yeah, that's I think mostly what I wanted to say. I don't want to go into details about what I wrote about all of them, so if you're really curious about them, I guess at the end of the video, so that you know if your series you specifically want to see what I thought, I will say what was included. So we had Vinland Saga, we've got The Promised Neverland, Tokyo, Aliens, Bakuman, Death Note, All You Need Is Kill. Yes, I like the artist guy. I've got a few by that same person. And it's also interesting, talking about Ibata, all of his started in the middle of the story. So I'm curious if, because there are some stuff that he's worked on that I don't have, so I am curious if that's something he does in every single one. But it was interesting that the three that I have all use that same method. I've got Yu-Gi-Oh!, D. Greyman, Full Metal Alchemist, Sailor Moon, Danganronpa 2, Ultra Hope, Luck, and Despair. It's like a spin-off series. Oriko Magica, Soul Eater, Link Click, Twisted Wonderland, Apple Black, Berserk, Pokemon, Hunter x Hunter, Naruto, My Hero Academia, Assassination Classroom, Mashal, Zelda, specifically I've got the Twilight Princess one, Seraph of the End, Gacha Akuta, and Neighborhood Story. So yeah, those are all the series that were included for me to do this research. If there's anything that I'm going to guess that if I ask, if there's any series that you really like the first page or want me to talk about, you guys are going to say Jujutsu Kaisen or One Piece. So I do a lot of live streams. If you're new to this channel, I recommend, and you like watching people draw on live, I recommend subscribing, because that's what you guys like. So yeah, I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks so much for watching, guys. You like my hat? Let me know what method you would prefer, what method you would use for your series if you're making a manga. If there's a first page that you feel like really deviated. I'm especially curious if you guys know any first pages that don't follow these rules that I've found out, so that I know like more of the exceptions. They're specifically interesting, but if also just tell me if you guys have got pages that you think are pretty. Pages you think are cool, like what's a first page that made you go, wow, that is cool, that really made me get reading, because I feel like I usually judge a series a little bit after the first page, but I know some readers are inclined to drop if they don't like that first page, they're not reading it, but I feel like I'm more likely to go, like, if I've started reading it, I'm gonna read probably more than the first page myself, but I'm someone that's read entire novels I didn't like. I'm a less fussy reader than some people are. If you've gotten me to start, I'm probably going to read at least your first chapter. I might stop after that if I don't like it, but I'm probably going to read more than the first page. So yeah, I'm going to go. Thanks so much for watching, and oh yeah, I should say the YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe, notification bell, especially because I go live nearly every day, so if you hit the notification bell, you'll know if I'm going live. And yeah. I'm gonna go. Hi, a quick amendment from editing me. You know it's serious because I don't have the hat. My statement about the like 3-panel thing I think might be inaccurate, looking again at things, because I didn't actually count out the amount of panels. Maybe I should have done that. But all the ones I picked out for the thumbnail have more than 3 panels, so yeah, I think I might have been wrong, and I thought, oh, well, maybe I should just change the ones I'm putting in the thumbnail so that I don't seem like an idiot, but I want to be intellectually honest here that was an assumption I had made. That was an observation I thought I had, but yeah, maybe I should actually count them. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? To get you guys to go read the document, I'm going to count out the number of panels, I think, on the page. Because I was so confident. I was like, yeah, no, I feel like a lot of them... Okay, a lot of the first ones I did. towards that I think that I analyzed first. Maybe I don't know where this conception came from, but I feel like that I had to add this amendment because it makes me look stupid, yes, but I want to be honest with you. I don't want to hide this fact just because I don't want to re-record everything. And I was wrong. And hey, that's part of learning and stuff. Is sometimes you think you know something, but then you realize, oh wait, actually, having a look at these, because like, especially if you're not looking closely, it can maybe feel like it because of the rows thing that they can have. Like often they'll have 3 rows of panels. Okay, like I don't know if you guys get what I mean, but yeah, that's something to maybe take into. I still think that I still agree with my statement about Pokemon being more crowded feeling. Like it felt a lot more crowded than any of the others, but maybe it doesn't have that many more panels. Maybe it's something else created that claustrophobic feel. So yeah, that's my amendment. I am now going, but yeah, I had to add this on. I had to be like, yeah, I can't ignore this fact.